Good evening, guys. I'm Chris, and welcome back to this Wednesday's episode of Rift Amps. Just doing the final assembly on the hook, putting it all back together. It was running great on the bench, stuck it in the cabinet, gave it a final play test, and the reverb not working. Bizarre. So swapped out the cable, no good. All right, disassemble the whole thing again, pull the tank out, and got a broken wire here. Should ground to this, sorry, should solder to that point there. Where is it? There it is. From there. So we'll quickly fix that, get it back in the cabinet, and that would be the hook done. Right, Q&A time. The Morgan Organ says, you mentioned you bought your dummy load resistor on eBay in a previous video. Correction, no I didn't. I said they are available on eBay, but I didn't get mine from there. A good friend of mine doesn't do it anymore, but used to be a service tech for lifts, elevators. And he got me one because that's what they use in those circuits, those big, powerful resistors. And he said, I've got some of these 8 ohms, do you want one? I said, yeah, absolutely, no problem. And I've been running that one for years. Turns out they are pretty much exactly the same spec as those eBay ones. So whereas I paid quite a lot of money for mine from him, you can get them on eBay now for for, I don't know, what are they, 30, 40 quid? I assume they're the same spec. I haven't really looked into it that much. But what I will say is that they are only 1000 watt when they're heat sinked. Otherwise, they're only around 200, 250. So make sure you heat sink it if you want to get the full wattage out of them. But yeah, it's those braking resistors. I might buy one of the eBay ones and compare it to the one I've got. But I've had that one for pretty much since I started Rift. So we're coming up on 2013 I went full time. So we're coming up on my 13th, 14th year now. Amazing. There you go. BC Electronic, hello mate, how are you? Says, hey Chris, I think this would be an appropriate question for your VCQs as you're always very informative. Well, thank you. Question, even though an output transformer failing is a rare failure in an amp, yeah, are there any consistent causes that lead to an output transformer failing? Yeah, there's build error and there are parasitic or high frequency oscillations. So the main one is that the builder has not appropriately protected the output transformer when he's building it. HT fuses or B plus fuses is the main one. So when you get a rectifier valve failure or an output valve failure, you can quickly damage that output transformer in various ways. But the main one, and this is why I bang on about it all the time, and I always show them off on the scope, high frequency oscillations. So that means that the amplifier is feeding back and overdriving at full chat at a frequency that you can't hear with the human ear, which is why you need an oscilloscope. So even though the amp might be sitting there on your, in your jam room, in your man cave, in your rehearsal studio, and it all seems fine, at a frequency you can't hear, that amp is running full chat and it's overheating that transformer and it will cook it. Which is why, if you see a parasitic or high frequency oscillation, you fix it damn fast. And this is what annoys me about small time builders who don't check their amplifiers on an oscilloscope before they send them out the door. They go, oh, it sounds great, it must be good. No, it's a ticking time bomb. Get it fixed. Do your job properly, right? So that's the main thing. High frequency parasitic oscillations. They literally kill output transformers dead as a dodo, dead as a doornail, whatever phrase you want to use, very, very quickly. And with vintage amplifiers, the most valuable part of the amp, from both a financial and a toneful or a tone perspective, is the output transformer. Protect it. Make sure the amp's running good. Fix those issues. Don't just assume because you can't hear a problem that there isn't one. Get it sorted. Can you imagine, let's say you've got one of the most high valuable vintage amps at the moment, big box Tweed Twins, small box Tweed Twins, Brown Vibe Reverbs, very early Marshall JTMs, all those things, things that are now fetching £12,000-15,000, even higher sometimes. Do not risk the original transformers in that because of sloppy lead dress or something like that. That's why you must get your amps checked. Right, speaking of the hook, I've drawn out the schematic properly now. The only thing I haven't got on here is the bias supply, but it's so simple you don't even really need to draw it out. It's only 4 or 5 components. Very interesting amp. The first time this amp came in, one of my first remarks was how great it sounded. It's actually a really, really good sounding amp. The cleans on it are sensational, to put it lightly. They're really, really good. It's got a nice, thick, meaty overdrive. All right, not probably as bitey as a Marshall style thing, but we know it's not based on that. It's definitely more on the Fendery side of things, but it does it really well. It's not a bad sounding amplifier at all. In fact, it's really, really good. And if it didn't have the build issues that it's got, and bear in mind, I'll caveat that by saying I can only talk about the amplifier that I had on my bench. I don't know if they're all like that. I don't know how old this amplifier is. You know, I know there's a newer version out. So with all those things taken into consideration, I really like the sound of this amplifier. And now that I've drawn the schematic out, I can see why. Because it's actually a really well thought out but simple circuit with some really nice features in there. So whoever the designer was, or the engineer that worked on this amp, clearly knew what they were doing. They knew how to EQ, attenuate, shape, amplify the signal as it goes through really well. Done a really good job. Where this amp falls down, unfortunately, is in the manufacturing and the build. You know, the build of the amplifier. It's, if this was a properly high-end boutique hand-wired, you know, on a nice piece of eyelet or turret board, done properly or done to that kind of standard, then yeah, this amp would be, it would be up there. It really would. Not very often I sing praises of my competitors, but you know what? When it's warranted, why not? You know, if it's a good sounding amp, it's a good sounding amp, and if it inspires you to make music, then that's the goal, right? So I'll just take you through it really, really simply. Hopefully this is all in focus. So we've got a single input here, a pretty standard input stage here, 100k plate resistor, got a 22k grid stopper, slightly lower than normal with a 1 meg grid leak. We've got a 1k5 cathode resistor with a 4U7 bypass cap, and that's pretty standard going throughout the amp. That's the value they seem to like. So they're deliberately not boosting a lot of the bottom end, but more than you would do on a Marshall style build. Okay, we've got an anode follower tone stack here, but really interesting is that the base pot has a 1k8 resistor, tail resistor coming off it to ground, but the mid pot is separate to that. We've got a pretty standard 220 puff, 100 nanofarad base cap, and a 47 nanofarad mid cap there. This arrangement here over a standard Fender style tone stack is, I know it looks like one, but the way they've done the bass and the mid there is why that mid control has quite a lot of range in it, and it allows you to really thicken up the mids and remove that smiley face, that scoop sound if you want. Really, really interesting. Standard straight into the gain control here. It's got a switchable bright cap. Now this is the cap here that I added when it was last in for repair because the gain control was scratchy, because there was DC appearing on that pot. And remember, this is before I drew the schematic out, so I just added that blocking cap there just to help. I now know where that is coming from, and I'll show you why. We then got an attenuation resistor here, 220k, which bypassed with a 220 puff cap here into the grid of V1A. Now, it uses a Dumble style local feedback here, which was, if you look at a lot of Dumble amps, you like to use this, where from the anode of a gain stage, you have a 22 meg resistor, then you'd have a large value cap, or relatively large value cap, with another 22 meg resistor here back to the input grid. So you've got a tiny bit of local feedback there just to try and control the gain there. Can we guess why DC was appearing on this pot? Yes, that's right. That cap had gone leaky. So you've got high voltage here, tiny bit of DC leaking all the way through that cap, through that resistor again. By this point, we're talking, you know, we're down to millivolts, but just enough through that resistor there onto the grid there. And that's where we had that original problem there. So that 47 nanofarad that I've added isn't in the original amp, but there you go. Next gain stage, sorry, after this gain stage here, again a 1K5 with a 4U7, got a 22 nanofarad coupling cap. It's actually a 20 nanofarad in the amp, but 22 is your standard value onto your master control. And at this point, this is where I find it was quite interesting, is where the reverb taps off. So the reverb taps off after the master volume. Now I would be inclined, so that means that the input level of the reverb control tracks the master volume. Now, if it was me, I'd tap it off before that point, but there's a reason they've decided to do that, and it works surprisingly well. It's got the 2-rock Dumble style reverb circuit in it, so rather than just a Fender style circuit, we've got a pre-gain reverb stage here. So we're boosting the signal here. Then you've got your reverb driver. It's just a Fender style reverb transformer here. Small reverb tank. Then you've got your recovery stage, and then a further gain stage as well with a reverb control in the middle. And that's the circuit that you see in a lot of the 2-rock and Dumble style reverb circuits. Very interesting. It gives you a really nice reverb sound, although you might argue it's a bit over the top, but whatever. Anyway, and that then feeds back from this point into this point here. Okay, so between the reverb send and reverb return, you've actually got another gain stage here. And at that point, you've got straight to your phase inverter. From that point, it's very simple. It's a standard long tail pair phase inverter with negative feedback feeding your output stage. 4, 8 and 16 ohm outputs with negative feedback coming off your 8 ohm tap there, which feeds back in here. It's all very simple. B plus rail, again, very, very simple. We'll zoom you in so you can see it a bit better. Full wave rectified. Got totem pole configuration here for B+1. That feeds the output transformer. Got your HT fuse after that. Then you've got a big dropping resistor. Now this one is not on the board, that's in the chassis itself. You've then got another totem pole stack here for your screen supply. Then you've got your droppers through. And you've also got a bleed resistor at the very end of the circuit there. Very nice indeed. So it's quite a simple amp, but it's done surprisingly well. And I think if you were to build that, as that, do a hand-wired version and do everything properly, or do everything to the highest standard you can, you'd end up with a really nice toneful amplifier. I could see a lot of benefits in that. But anyway, that's the Hook Little Lenny. That's version 4 at least. That's V4 is written on the board, so that's how that one is. Really cool amp. Really impressed by it. Haven't really got much more to say other than, yeah, I think it sounds really, really good. Thu Tran Films, I guess, says, hi, where do you have the transformer rewound, or do you do it yourself? I don't do it myself. In the UK, there are a number of places where you can go. I don't know about the rest of the world. But I've used quite a few different firms over the years. I know who I like and who I don't. I know who I can rely on and who's used to be good and who's used to be not, and who no longer is, that kind of stuff. I try not to throw businesses under the bus. I just promote who I think is good. I think that's the best way of doing it. So I use a number of different firms, as I said. Who would I recommend in the UK? So there's a Transformer Equipment, guy called Luke runs that. Amazing job. He's done a couple of rewinds for me. Transtronic up north, they're very good. Primary Windings good. Danbury Electronics good. And Modulus will do them if he's in the mood for it. I know he doesn't like to do them, he prefers just to do new production stuff. But if you're stuck, sometimes he will do your rewind. But yeah, in the UK, I would probably choose Transformer Equipment or Primary Windings. Just out getting some sun on my lunch break. It's been amazing weather past couple of days. We've got a couple more of this as well before it turns rubbish again. So yeah, not bad at all. They've actually opened a farm shop here on the farm, selling all bits and pieces. So I might wander down, see if they've got any goodies. But yeah, really cool. Farm shops here in the UK can only sell stuff that's local. I think it's a 15-mile radius. So they've got all lots of local produce from all the other local farms in the area. It's really cool. So yeah, Anyway, just on my lunch break.
Want lamb chops done in pairs because, like, my mother-in-law, she'll say, oh, it's such a shame when you go somewhere and you have to buy, like,
Got me some local sausages and some local butter. So I'm going to make some sausage rolls, make my own puff pastry with the butter. Yeah. WS Scott 72 says, Chris, I found that the code for the output transformer in the Gretsch is a tri-web. Yes, I know that. Was made 26th week of 1963. I haven't found anything on the E6113 code yet. I have, and I have good news on that. So a very, very nice chap sent me an email and said he had a Gretsch 6160 that also had a failed output transformer. And when they measured his, it's the same spec as the datasheet I had for the other model, 5K primary, but of course it's not a 8-ohm secondary, it's only a 4-ohm because it's two 8-ohm speakers in parallel. So that's it, it's a 5K primary into 4 ohms. CJ2 says, talking about the 1-800 head, he said, that's not a sine wave, just saying. And Reginald F said, hello there, was wondering for some time what output valve you would use for that 1 watt. An ECC82 is an interesting choice. Yes, it is. They're brilliant. I have to say, though, that output signal does not look clean at all, not exactly sine wave-like. And you'd be right, and there's a very interesting reason for this. It's because of the way the cathode follower tone stack in a JCM 800 style amplifier works and shapes your tone. So when I bench test an amplifier, my default settings are to have the treble on 0, the bass on 0, and if it's got a mid control, to crank that all the way around. Same with the presence control. I always have the presence control fully or all the way around. And that's the way I default test every amplifier that's on the bench. But with these style amplifiers, and anyone who's had a JCM 800 on the bench will be familiar with this, that if you do that, so at the moment I've got my treble, middle, bass and presence all on 0, and that's your output sine wave, nice and clean. But if I crank the middle control, watch what it does. Gives you that slightly stranger looking sine wave. You see it? There she is. We come back, and if I then mess around with the presence control, it exaggerates that even further. So it's quite important to not get too bogged down in what the output sine wave of a JC800 looks like, because you've got to understand how the tone stack works, how it's shaping the signal, what it's doing. It's actually quite a powerful tone stack for a cathode follower. All right. Do you use the 2 systems of the ECC in conventional push-pull configuration? Yes, I do, with an approximate 22k primary impedance or load from the transformer. And it strikes me that according to your bias notes, you run it with 120% of the max plate voltage, but rather meagre on the current. Yes, draw some load lines and you'll see exactly why. Making some progress on this silver panel Princeton Reverb, the black line one. This is the one that came in for a 240 volt conversion. It's got the master volume in where the intensity control normally sits. We're going to relocate that, reactivate or reinstall the original intensity control. It's got some couple of mods in the preamp, but I'm just going through. I need to desolder the can cap to remove that, to replace it. Got a replacement one here. Transformer has arrived, and I'm just going through doing the initial strip down of the old electrolytics and bits and pieces, and then once I've done the basics service, I can then start the rebuild. But I've got a lot of cleaning to do, a lot of sorting out, because we've got an amplifier that it's in a reasonable condition for its age. It's not perfect, so it needs a bit of TLC, but I'm also trying not to put it completely back to stock because it's got these mods going in. So it's just trying to balance it between, what I would like to do, what the customer wants, what's right for the amp, what it actually needs versus, your wish list, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm just working through it, and the sun is shining and I'm having a lovely time doing it. So yeah, I'm going to crack on with this, and hopefully I'll have it up and running for the next video. Wow, I had lots and lots of comments on that Princeton non-reverb clone, the one, the homebrew thing that's not a homebrew, that's actually being sold to customers. Some people have really opinionated on it, and maybe rightly so. Some people a bit more constructive in their criticism on it, and that's fine, that's great. So a bit more story behind that amp. The customer contacted the builder and said, this is what I would like. I'd like you to build me a non-reverb Princeton clone, as you do. Now, I'm still not going to name the builder, and I'll give you my reasons for that shortly. But it was the customer's idea to have the circuit board on the outside of the chassis because he wanted to be able to see it when the amplifier was in use. Now, that's a request I get a lot of times. People want to see the inside of the amplifier from the outside. Fine. And a usual way to do that is with, the especially on like tweed amps where they put like the plexiglass plexiglass panel in P1, so then from the rear you can look into it and you can see the circuitry. And I understand that, and especially if the circuitry is well done, and it does look like a piece of art, why wouldn't you want to show that off? I get that. The builder of that amplifier obviously agreed to that, and in his mind, obviously I can't speak for him, thought the best way of doing that would be to mount it on the outside and run the wires through the chassis. Now, he should have used grommets, whatever, but also when you're passing high voltage wires through a chassis like that, there has to be absolutely no risk of the user being exposed to that. So realistically, there should have been, I mean, he could have put a see-through plastic box over the top that was bolted to the chassis. Yes, it wouldn't have worked with a Faraday cage, but it would have offered that level of protection to the customer. So he took a customer idea and he tried his best. And on some level, I'll give him credit for trying. Fine. The execution of it, obviously not great. So there is that to bear in mind as well. Some of you have said, particularly Russ said, sorry, but that builder needs naming and shaming. This is one of those occasions where ethics should be kicked out the door and common sense applied. I'm old school. People like this don't deserve to be in business and shouldn't be allowed to sell such pony and trap. He's endangering people's lives and should be prosecuted. Well, yes, if you're going to throw the book at somebody or look at it from that point of view, then yes. Now, my understanding is that this guy isn't an experienced builder, is relatively new to the scene, has got a great USP in that he's trying to, upcycle and reuse old chassis and transformers and bits and repurpose them into new working amplifiers. And I think that's a great idea, and fair play to the chap. But UK law, and by extension EU law, or the other way around, whichever way you want to look at it, says that if you are selling commercially and building a mains powered appliance, your products have to follow the letter of the law. No questions asked. Even if you're only building one a year and selling it to your mate in the pub, if you're selling it as a commercial entity, you have to do it. There's no exceptions, and there are. I mean, the red tape is quite extensive, and I moan about this all the time. But the biggest time kill for me as an amplifier manufacturer is the paperwork. Making sure that all of my stuff is up to date, making sure that I've got the correct compliance. I know what my obligations are, make sure I fully understand every regulation that applies to me for every market in which I sell. I have to understand what I'm doing. And I know this sounds really, really morbid, but people come to me all the time and say, how do I start an amplifier business? Have you got any tips for me? And I say, yeah, understand the law. Understand the law. Understand what you must do. You need to understand the law to the point where you could stand up in a coroner's court and say, my product did not kill that person, did not burn down that house, kill that family of 4, because I did this, this and this, I know the law and I did this, I complied with this, I followed everything, here's my records, this is what I did. There was no way that my product could have done that, so it must have been something else. That's how confident you need to be. You need to know inside out, back to front, upside down, etc., etc. If you don't know that, then your product should not be on the market. That's the black and white answer. Now, this guy, I always say, if an amplifier doesn't comply with the electrical safety regs, then there can only ever be one of 2 reasons. The first reason is that they don't know what the regulations are, most likely in this case here. Reason 2, and this is the one that really scares me, is that the builder or manufacturer is aware of the regulations and has chosen to ignore them. Both of those scare me, but the second one really scares me. Yeah. Oh, I can see that's what it says. I understand it, but not doing that. I'm doing it my own way. No, I'm sorry. So I suspect in with the case with that amplifier, the first option is most likely he's just not fully aware of his obligations and the law surrounding the things. So thankfully, these things can be learned, and that's the way we tend to look at these things. Now, we need more app builders in the UK, we need more app builders in Europe, and we need more app builders around the world. It's a dying art form, less people are getting into it, and we need more people who can not only repair these things but can design and manufacture them. So we have to do everything we can to encourage, educate and inform. And that's the way the UK authorities tend to look at this stuff as well. So we've got trading standards who deal with certain things, but also the safety and governance of this stuff is run by a government department called the Office for Product Safety Standards, the OPSS, and they like to enforce and inform and educate to make sure that people are doing things properly. And they've got the power to prosecute you if you're doing something wrong. They've got the power to stop you trading if they need to, if you're doing something really dangerous. And they've also got the power to help you and say, you've got this slightly wrong. Because often there are bits in the law which contradict each other. You might have one piece of legislation that says do this, or you can't do this, or do it this way, and another that says no, you've got to do it this way. And sometimes there's a bit of a crossover, and that's what they're for, to help. You can ring them up, you can email them, and you can ask these questions and say, this says this and this says this, where should I go with it? How does it work? Now I know of probably 6 or 7 UK amplifier businesses since I started Rift, so 12, 13 years now, who started up and have been closed down by trading standards and OPSS for various reasons. Most of the time it's to do with non-compliance of safety regs. And they often say to you, if they come to you and say, we've identified your products don't comply, they're unsafe, and they give you a chance to fix it and to rectify. The law allows for that. The law says you can do these things. This is what you need to do. There's a framework involved. And if you comply and go through with it, you're allowed to carry on. And they also do spot checks as well, which is really interesting. So they can turn up at any point, and they have done before, to say, show us your technical files, show us what you're doing, show us your processes. And you have to stop what you're doing and say, yeah, this is what I'm doing, da-da-da. But they also say, when they do that, do you have any questions? And you say, yeah, I'm not sure about this bit, or this bit is a bit confusing, and this bit says this, and this bit says this. Do you want to give me some clarity? And they're really good at helping you. So some of you said this guy should be reported to the authorities. As far as I'm aware, he already has been. And they will go through that with him and help him out, and whether they make him stop building amplifiers or commercially or not, I don't know. Full disclosure, I was not the one who has reported him. As far as I'm aware, other people have. I'm not sure whether me putting out the video or me bringing this stuff up on certain forums about the guy has triggered that, but I know that he has, reports have been made about this guy. And hopefully he brings everything in line. He gets the help and support and understanding that he needs, so he can carry on building amplifiers, and we can get a greater community building stuff. Because that's what we want. We want more people doing it, or we want more people doing it properly. We want great amplifiers being built that sound good and are safe, right? Cool. So there was one other question. Oh yeah, Richard Holster says, hi Chris, read the homebrew amp. The tech probably didn't realise that he's not doing anything wrong. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly my point. Just be careful about working on an amp that you could potentially take on as the liability. That's exactly how it works. As a repair tech, at least in the UK anyway, the minute I touch something, I am liable for it, right? Which is why I have insurance up to the hill. I am fully insured for multiple millions of pounds, and that insurance comes with legal advice and protection and all that kind of stuff. So, but the way it works is if I repair, restore, or repurpose an amplifier, I'm liable for it for a period of 12 months, providing it's then not further modified or repaired by someone else down the line. So every amplifier I take on, I'm liable for it. That's why you have to sign a form when you drop it off. Yeah. So I am liable for that amplifier. Absolutely. It's part of the business. I take on the liability for every amp that comes through the door. I'm not worried about that because I'm confident in my work and how these things could possibly end up. So regarding that amplifier, where are we with it? So my main concern with that was, one, making sure the amplifier was safe to plug into the mains outlet and to apply mains voltage to, which it now is. The second one was to make sure that the amplifier, when it develops a fault in the future, it has its own internal protection, that it will then protect itself and therefore the user. The owner has agreed that we're going to do the rest of the work. So we are going to fix the issues with all the wires running through the chassis. We are going to make this thing safe. Someone made a comment about, well, you know, when you're changing valves, there still could be high voltage on those terminals when the amplifier is switched off. Yes, but it does have a drain resistor, so it does drain down quite quickly. So we are going to go through and we are going to fix all those issues for the customer, and he has agreed that he's going to pay for that. Someone asked me why bother doing that work, the safety work, for free. Well, because it's not the customer's fault, you know, and I can't sleep at night knowing there's an unsafe amplifier out there. Because of doing that, the customer is bringing me one of his other amplifiers for modification, so I've got more work out of it. So, you know, you look after customers, they look after you. Simple as that. So it's a long old thing, but to summarize, yes, the amplifier was incredibly unsafe and it shouldn't have been sold. Thankfully, it is now much safer. It's going to be made even safer in the future. The builder of the amplifier is aware that he's now aware, at least, that what he's doing is not right, and it's probably down to him not knowing that rather than him deliberately building unsafe amplifiers. And hopefully he gets everything sorted, carries on building safe, toneful, good sounding, well built amplifiers, and we're all good. Someone asked me, how do you ensure that you know who's building your amplifier is building them safe and is up to spec? Well, there's a lot of clues there. One, if it's too cheap, that's, you know, that's generally a good clue, right? But two, you're welcome to ask. You say, can you confirm to me that you build everything to the regulations? Can you prove that your amplifiers comply, that you've got the right approvals in the right place, and all that kind of stuff? As a consumer, you have a right to ask these questions, and if you get anything other than a perfect answer, don't hand over your money. Well, that's it then, guys. Thank you very much for watching once again. As always, please give this video a thumbs up, or your comments and questions down below. Subscribe, hit the notification bell if you haven't already. If you're feeling super generous like these 36 very kind chaps have, why not join the channel, and I will catch you all at the next one.